Here we are with patterns in Photoshop. I'm Jason Hoppy, and I'm going to show you some of the cool ways that patterns can be created and used in Photoshop, plus a totally new feature using Photoshop and Creative Cloud libraries to create a really interesting pattern. Up until now, patterns were just generated from an image where you select a portion, but I'm going to show you a cool trick that is now incorporating the Adobe Capture app inside of Photoshop. So patterns are just a panel. You can go into your window menu and call up patterns. And here, the basic Photoshop patterns, they've got a few trees and a few grass and water. And you can go into your patterns panel, and on your layers, you just double click on any one of your patterns here, and it will give you a pattern. And what it does is it simply puts it into your layers panel if you have gone in and created a pattern fill. So if you go to your layers panel and go to your half moon, you simply select pattern. And from the pattern fill dialog box, you can choose from the limited supply here, but we're going to make our own. Click on whatever you want. You can scale this by using the scale here to make more grass, less grass, whatever you want. Click OK. And it comes in as a pattern fill layer in the layers panel. To edit this, just simply click on the layer thumbnail and go back in and choose any other pattern here. If you'd like more patterns, very easy to get more patterns. You can go to your patterns panel, go to the cheese grater drop down, and you can restore the default patterns, which are going to be patterns that were in older versions of Photoshop. So that's the legacy patterns and more. So if you click on the legacy patterns and more, this will give you tons of patterns from last year's Creative Cloud, as well as all the other patterns that have been in here for quite some time. So there's tons and tons of patterns here, as well as the ones that come with Photoshop. So don't feel like you can't go in and just grab something from the patterns here. Tons of them. But I'm going to show you how to make a pattern yourself. So lots of patterns available, but don't worry about it. You can make your own. And here's how you make your own pattern. I see this bagel and I thought, oh, maybe it would be cool to try a pattern with one of these seeds. I'm going to take my image. I'm going to put a selection around what I'd like to make a pattern out of. It's going to be very small. And it's just going to take this and it's simply going to repeat everything in here. So in order to define that pattern, I'm going to put a selection around it. Go into the Edit menu and define pattern. And I'm going to call this my seed. I'm going to click OK. And there's my little bagel seed right there. Great. So if I go to my original file here, go to my layers panel, I can either double click on an existing pattern fill here, or click on a new pattern fill and call up my pattern either way. I'm going to double click on the existing pattern fill, choose from my drop down menu. All new patterns will go at the bottom unless you have a folder selected, and then it will go in that folder. And then, based on this, you can choose the scale of your pattern here, up or down, and it's just simply going to repeat that particular image over and over again. Okay? Now, one of the things when you go in and create a selection around here is it has to be a hard edge selection. And all it does is takes this and simply blends it all together. If you wanted to soften the edge here to get this to blend in, unfortunately, feathering the edge will not allow you to go in and capture a pattern. So it does have to be a hard edge selection. But with this pattern, you have the ability to then apply it to any other object. But there's a really interesting thing that comes up that is outside the realm of define pattern. And that is actually in the libraries panel. And the libraries panel is really cool because it allows you to do something that you couldn't do before in Photoshop. And that is, if I've got this image here, and I don't want to go in and define a certain area by using a selection here, what I'd like to do is I'd like to use the overall image and kind of play with the composition. So at the bottom of my libraries panel, I'm going to go to my plus, which is add content. I'm going to click on this. I can add the foreground color that I was last using, or this as an image or a graphic, but I'm going to choose create from image. So I'm going to create from image, and from this, I'm going to go in and I've got patterns, shapes, color, themes, gradients here. I'm going to click on patterns. And if you've never used the Adobe Capture app, this is one of the things that you could do. So in the pattern section, I have a way that I can go in and do different types of geometric patterns here and create something cool like this. Okay? So I can change the scale of this, and what I'm changing here is I'm changing the scale of the viewing window. And so here I can see a triangle, and then I can move my object all around the triangle. I can do any type of patterns here, and here I get a little corner triangle. Here I get a little angled, and I can create any type of very interesting pattern, which is great. I can rotate my image too to kind of get this kaleidoscope effect. And once I see this pattern and think, okay, this is awesome, I can save this to my Creative Cloud library, and it's going to put it into my pattern section of my library. It now tells me that it's saved. I can close out of this dialog box, and in my libraries panel now, it is capturing this as patterns, which is totally awesome. Okay? So these are actual patterns here in my library. So if I jump back over to my image that I have here and I go into my layers right there, if I would like to grab something from my library, I can just drag it from my library right into and drop it into my image. So if I go back to my layers panel, I've actually dragged this in and it has created a pattern fill layer. So I'm going to turn off my other layers there. So there's my pattern fill. If I double click on this pattern fill icon, I can scale this pattern up or down, however I want to create that pattern fill, which is absolutely phenomenal. So now you can create any type of pattern, any type of texture, not just the old-fashioned way of selecting, but actually using your libraries here in order to get this, which is an absolutely amazing, awesome thing. Now, if you wanted to go in and you wanted then to warp this or do any type of manipulation to this, you can always take your pattern fill layer, right-click on this, convert this to a smart object, and then you could go in and transform and warp and distort this however you want to. And then, of course, if you ever wanted to swap out your pattern after you've done your transform and warp and wanted to keep your transform and warp, you could always go back into your smart object, go back into your pattern fill, and choose whatever ones that you want from here, which is really awesome. So this type of method of creating patterns here is something that I discovered, and I think it's absolutely amazing. Because once you learn how to do patterns, you can then map patterns to any object that you have.